Hi, I'm Dave Engelbretson, and along with Leroy Hyatt, we'd like to welcome you to another edition of Fly Tying, the Angler's Art. And as we often do, we've got a real mixed bag tonight. We're going to tie a dry fly, a great big nymph, and a little tiny midge. We're going to start out with the Rio Grande King Trude. We're going to do the Girdle Bug Nymph and the CDC Midge Pupa. So if you can talk better than I can, why don't you tell them what we're going to use to tie that Rio Grande King?
We'll use a Coachman Brown. This is a grizzly dyed Coachman for the hackle. The tail material will be tied with a golden pheasant tippet. The Trude wing will be tied with white calf tail. The body will be a dubbed black, and the thread, the old standard 6/0 black tying thread. Now, like you said, these are normally tied a little bigger. I have a size, I think that's a 12 in the vise. I'll go ahead and dress that entire hook shank with the tying thread. Come back to the rear, and then I'll pull one of these golden pheasant. These golden pheasant, it makes a good looking fly. It makes a pretty fly.
Well, you know, the Rio Grande King has always been popular, and the Rio Grande King originally had an upright calf tail wing, divided wing. Then they developed the Trude style of tying, and it's Trude, T-R-U-D-E, not true, but T-R-U-D-E, Trude. And that was developed with this down style wing, which is sort of reminiscent of a caddis, maybe. It's easy to see and easier to tie on. And before we were starting, I was talking, I can't exactly remember, I should know what the development of that Trude was. Seems to me it came about in Colorado, and I just don't remember the story of the development of that wing. But now the Trude style of tying, you can tie a lot of different patterns, Trude style, by putting the wing down.
I've seen
wing down.
Royal Wolves tied.
A Royal Trude.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah. All right, for the body material, I'm going to dub some black. This happens to be a black rabbit. I'll keep it real fine on the thread, and I may have to do it in a couple of steps. We'll see. And just start wrapping. Now I want to keep that body fairly thin back here to the rear and try to build a bit of a taper as I go forward. I'll go back over that just a little bit, and you can see I'm running out of dubbing. Put just a little bit more on.
Well, if you're using a sparse dubbing like you should on the thread, then you can count on adding more and building your taper. But if you use too much dubbing, you can't build the taper.
Can't do it. And then we'll start wrapping again. Go forward again just a little way, and then back over it. Just to build a taper. And I don't know that that taper is really all that necessary. If you just had a good straight flat body, it'd probably catch just as many fish. For a wing,
I like the looks of a taper.
Oh yeah. For a wing, I'll use some white calf tail. And again, like we've said many times, most of the time you'll find these flies will have too much material in them. More is not always better. The wing is really nothing more than for you to see, and all of that hair on there will have a tendency to make that fly harder to float. Pull a few more of the stragglers out. I'll lay this on there. I don't want it to be quite as long as the tail. Now I'm going to go around the hair itself first without going around the hook. Then I'll lay it down, and then I'm going to go around the hook and hair both. That will really hold that. It will bind it very well down in place.
That's a good trick. Good trick. I've never done that.
Then I'll clip this off and get a hackle that I already had laid out here. These are hackled very heavily. I'm sure it's used mostly in rough water. At least that's where I use
rough water
the fly,
sure.
With all the hackle on it. Well, that's going to want to twist on me for some reason.
I think I first ran into the fly down in southern Colorado, down near the New Mexico border. I was fishing the Conejos River years ago, 1968, 67, I guess.
You're older than I thought.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm as old as dirt. But the nice part about that is it's let me fish a lot of neat places. But that's where I ran into the that's where I ran into the Trude Rio Grande King Trude at any rate, and oh, it did a nice job.
Oh,
it's been a good fly for me ever since.
It's a fun fly. And you know, you could also put this in the bright green, the wing.
Could, oh
or
yeah.
you could put it
High
in the
vis,
red,
yeah.
you bet. Now I'll put a little whip finish on it. Clip it off. Put a little ball of head cement on it. Yeah, it's a pretty fly. I really like to tie flies with that grizzly hackle. I mean, with the pheasant tail.
Oh, that golden pheasant crest
pheasant,
tail,
yeah.
It's just pretty stuff. I don't know if it's the best tailing material in the
No,
world, but it
it
looks
probably
so nice.
isn't, but it sure looks good. And that's the Rio Grande King Trude. Has the golden pheasant tippet for the tail, has the black dubbing, rabbit dubbing for the body, has the white calf-tail wing, the dark coachman brown for the hackle.
Well, now we're going to tie a very large nymph. This basically represents a stonefly nymph. And Leroy, I think this is primarily a western nymph. I don't know that I've ever seen it fished anywhere else.
I think it started in Montana.
Started in Montana. It's called the Girdle Bug Nymph. But I don't see any reason why it couldn't be tied in other sizes or even other colors and used as a stonefly imitation very effectively in other places. You could tie, for example, a number 12 in olive green.
Oh, absolutely.
Would work just as well. So even though you don't live in the West, take note of how to tie the girdle bug and see how you can adapt it as a stonefly nymph for the waters you do fish. What are you going to use to tie the girdle bug?
Okay, tonight we'll tie a black one. Now I'll have the black rubber legs. Now I've also seen this fly tied with white rubber legs. Either one will work. Tonight we just have black. I'll have a black chenille. The fly is heavily weighted, like you said. I'll use a standard 6/0 black tying thread. I have a size 8 2X long hook that I'll put in the vise. And I'm going to dress that whole hook shank.
Now in the West, we tie them all the way from 4s, it could even be 2, I suppose. 4, 6, 8s.
And then chuck and duck.
Yep.
Now I'm going to weight this fly with the lead wire.
Some of those nymphs weigh more than some of the trout I catch.
Unbelievable weight. Now,
but you really need them to get down on the bottom where the real stonefly nymphs are.
Yes. And you'll see when we get it tied, those rubber legs give very lifelike movement.
Oh, yeah. And as far as the weight goes, now, you know, we're getting more environmentally conscious. There's tin and there's tungsten, and you don't have to use lead anymore. And it would be a good idea to search for some of the substitutes.
Okay, there's the lead wire. Now I'm going to put a coating of this rubber-based glue on it, and then I'm going to also wrap the tying thread over to totally seal it down.
I think it's a good idea. I always very heavily wrap my lead-weighted or my weighted bodies.
That lead may have a tendency to want to start unraveling.
Untwisting, and it causes all sorts of trouble.
Yeah. But I'm going to make 3 or 4 passes over here, and I know then it's going to be
And then I put
good.
more cement on top of that.
Well, I won't for this one. You sure could. It wouldn't be a problem. Now for the rubber leg, it comes in sheets like this, and all you got to do is pull, and one will pop off.
Yeah, they're divided into strands, and you just pull them off.
Yes.
And as you say now, I was surprised you were using black because I primarily see them with white legs.
And I've seen them with yellow.
And you could do yellow?
Whatever, yeah. Now the first one I'm going to tie on is going to be a tail section. Bind it down tight.
So you're going to fold it over in a V.
All I did was fold it, tie it down, and it's going to naturally fall into a V. I'll get the rest of those all bound down. Then I'll take a piece of black chenille, and again, like you said, this could be tied in a lot of different colors. I've seen them olives, dark browns. I've seen variegated.
Now, one thing I noticed you didn't do, but I often do, depending on the fly you're tying. This is a big bulky fly, and it's already got a big bulky body, but if you're tying in chenille, and you want to keep it a little more slim, then you strip off the fuzz between the threads.
Just leaving the
so
thread.
that you bind the threads down and not the chenille itself. And then when you wrap over it, you've got a smooth underbody. But of course,
this fly wouldn't make any
in this fly,
difference.
which is why you didn't do it.
Yes, right. I did go ahead and strip it off. It's just a habit that I always do.
And of course, you can also use a variety of sizes. This is a fine chenille, or you can use a medium chenille, depending on what effect you want and what size hook you're using.
Okay, now I've got the tail, the chenille tied in. Now I'm going to tie just a simple overhand knot in this piece of rubber leg, slide it over the hook, and pull it down. I'm going to do the same thing with 2 others. Again,
so you tie the front legs in, before you wrap the chenille body.
Yes, and then I can pretty well adjust how I want the position of the leg when the chenille goes forward.
I hate working around those dangling legs, so I normally wrap the body and then tie in the rear section, the rear legs, and then wrap the next little piece of body in the middle legs and the next piece of body in the front legs.
Well, when I come forward here too, I'm going to be working around those legs with my tying thread.
Right.
I'm going to tie down around that knot I just made there too. If I can get my chenille back out of the way. Why won't that stay up there? And come across. Now here I'm just taking very, very large wraps as I go. Come right across the top of that knot and across the top of this knot. And now my tying thread's in the front. Now here I come with the chenille. Just make sure you get a nice body, starting body back here in the back. You're right, the rubber legs can be a real pain to work around sometimes, but I like it when I come up around it. That way then I can force this leg back that's wanting to go a little bit forward.
Yeah. Well, I do the same thing, except I wait to put the leg in when I get there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then the leg is there. Now I go around that leg, and now I don't have any more legs to worry about. I put in more thorax, and then put the next set in, and I don't have to worry about all that dangly stuff.
It just shows there's many different ways to tie.
And it shows that some of us are clumsier than others. I'm clumsy, so I don't like to work around that stuff.
All right. We'll get on down there. Now there is the basic fly. Now I still have to go in and make those legs the length that I want.
Yeah, people should realize that the legs should be fairly long because you want the motion, and if you cut them straight, they stick straight out to the side, cut them short.
And I've also seen them where they'll trim the front leg shorter, then the middle section longer, the rear longer yet. I don't know how necessary all that is.
I like to have it so that when the fly is done, the legs have some droop to them.
You bet.
Because if they droop, then they've got some wiggly motion. If they're just sticking straight out to the side, I think they're too short.
Now what I'm going to do is pull each side of that one up and give a clip. That way I know that those 2 legs are going to be identical length.
And don't pull on them or you stretch them, and then when you cut them and they pop back, they're too short.
Yes, right. Now you can keep adjusting that ever how you want it. Some people might like to have those legs a little shorter. Be a very easy thing just to come through and trim. It's just whatever you're looking for. Also, this rubber leg comes in different sizes. This happens to be a medium size. The smaller diameter. The smaller size will have a tendency more to be a lot looser, flop around.
And it also comes in flat.
Yes, it does. Yes. I'll go ahead and put a whip finish on. Tie it down. And there's a girdle bug. It has the black rubber tail, has the black chenille body, and the black rubber for the legs.
Well, now we're going to go from a very large, almost gross fly, the big old rubber-legged girdle bug.
It's not gross, Dave. In the right place.
Down to the more sublime to a little midge pupa.
All right.
And this will be a CDC Midge Pupa. And we're making much more use of CDC now. It's a fairly new material, and people keep finding new uses for it to improve flies.
Yes, pattern books
for
are full of it.
floatability and for a little subtle motion. So we're going to tie a CDC Midge Pupa, and what are you going to use?
Okay, we'll use a black ostrich herl, 1 stem from it. Now I won't use the whole herl. I take a pencil eraser and erase the herl off the stem. All I'm going to use is the stem, so it'll be the body with a stripped black ostrich stem. The thorax will be black dubbing. The wing case and front wing section will be color canard or CDC. I'll use the black 6/0 dry fly thread. Now for this one, we're going to also use a waterproof color marker to color the wing case. We'll make part of that CDC a gray that goes over the wing case itself. I'll use a dry fly hook. This is a size 16.
And of course, being a midge pupa, it can be tied in any size from
very tiny,
22 or 20 or up to 12 or even bigger.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I've seen them that big, but I'm sure you could.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, some of the midge pupa are number 10 or 12, at least 2x long.
Yeah. No,
now
right.
that seems silly in the East. If I tied a big midge pupa, I tied a 16.
Yes.
But out here, when I moved out here and I heard about Polly Rossborough's pupa that was number 12, 2x long, I thought, well, what in the world had he been drinking when he saw those? But that's the way some of them are out here.
Yes, it is. Now, what I've done is I have taken one of those ostrich hurls and stripped it. You can see just the stripped hackle stem there now. I'll tie it in place. And as you wrap this on the hook, you will be able to see that there is an actual striped segmentation with it.
Yeah, that's the beauty of using this material as opposed to some others. You get a nice segmented effect. And what I normally do when I'm using any kind of a quill or substance like that for the body is I coat it with head cement.
Yes.
Makes it stronger and it brings out the gloss.
Now, I'll do that here. I may get in trouble with it because it doesn't dry fast enough.
You have to be a little careful before you start fiddling around with CDC.
If you get that
wet head cement.
CDC in it, it's, yeah.
But it does, I think it makes the body look better, and it certainly makes it stronger.
And really, that ostrich hurl, the stem is really quite strong compared to a lot of other stems that are out there.
And glossy, too.
Yes. Well, I'm ready to tie that CDC in. It's not dry, of course. I'll go ahead and just pinch it a little bit and see if we can't speed that along a little and hope for the best. Now, I've taken one of these CDC feathers. I'm just going to strip part of that hackle stem off, or part of the fibers off the stem, and we're going to lay it in so that the natural curvature of the feather is going up back here to the rear. I'm going to pull it through just a little bit, and then I'm going to clip this off. Don't need that on anymore. Then we'll take some of this black dubbing, and again, this is where you really, really do need a very thin layer of dubbing for flies this small. And we'll build a small thorax. Now, the thorax will definitely be larger than the body material. It needs to show a definite swelling of that wing
larger
case.
Diameter, sure.
Yes. That's some long fibers sticking out there. This is a rabbit dubbing, and sometimes there is a few guard hairs mixed in. I'll just go back over that again. With using the fine amount of dubbing, or the small amount of dubbing, you can go back over it and build a nice little
in fact, you have to build the hump, and that's
Sure.
the advantage of using just a little bit.
You bet. Now I'll fold this wing case over. And some of it did get stuck, but that's, maybe I can trim it off. And tie it down. I'm going to roll this a little and just get some of those short ones trimmed off of there.
Probably a good idea if you're tying these, you know, going to tie a dozen of them at home, do a dozen bodies and put the cement on and put them up to dry.
Yeah.
And when they're all good and dry, then come back and finish the fly.
Now with a gray waterproof marking pen, I'm going to come in and just dye that wing case gray.
You know, these colored marking pens are very handy, and their artists have them available in an art supply shop or a stationery store in a wide range of very subtle colors. I think I had my choice of at least 3, maybe 4 different grays I could have bought.
Okay.
And you know, I've heard of people that tie their nymph patterns in all white, and then they color them with pens as they need them.
I've heard guys on the stream, and they want to color part of a fly, they'll do the same thing. Now what I've done, Dave, is I've wrapped in front of this little wing section to stand that up. Really, that's going to be for you to see it. That CDC will actually help that fly float a little bit.
A lot of midge pupa have white gills in the front.
Yes.
And
but this is a real floatable material, and it may make the fly hang slightly in the film with this CDC being on top.
Which is how the natural floats.
Yes, it is. I'll put a little bit of head cement on the head here. I see I'm going to need to thin my head cement down a little, Dave. It's getting a little bit on the thick side. And there's a CDC Midge Pupa, has no tail whatsoever. The body is tied with stripped black ostrich stem. The thorax is black dubbing. This is rabbit dubbing. The wing case is a white CDC feather, color canard, that has been dyed gray with a waterproof marker, and then the little white wing case sticking on top.
I was going to say, you know, before I fish that, I usually put a finish on and cut the thread off.
Yes.
But
okay.
Now you may have a different technique. I don't know.
Well, it's hard to cast it with that bobbin.
It is,
too,
yeah, especially that bobbin. It swings around. You know, we might talk about fishing those things, and I know on other shows last year we talked about fishing midge pupa, but people may have missed those. It probably bears repeating. There are a number of different ways to fish midge pupa now.
And levels.
We have to think about any water, whether we're fishing in a lake or a stream, as having different levels. The bottom, the middle, the top inch or two in the surface film and up on top. And basically the flies are either going to be in the top couple of inches of water or on the bottom, not too often in the middle unless they're
hatching,
coming up and emerging. But unfortunately, when a lot of people fish nymphs, where do they fish it? The easiest place of all, in the middle.
That's right.
Well, at any rate, with the midge pupa then, this one is obviously tied to be fished in, on, or just under the surface.
Correct.
If you're fishing a deep pupa, you'll probably want to lengthen your leader and your tippet on a floating line and use a weighted pupa and let it sink.
Hare's ear nymph.
Hare's ear nymph, or this pupa right
or
here.
Or this one if you put a little lead wrap in it.
A little lead wrap in it. But let it sink, count down so you can repeat the depth, and then when you discover where you catch fish, you can repeat that depth.
And you know, the long leader thing, like you're saying, a lot of people will shorten the leader, even on a floating line or even a sinking line, where actually the longer the leader, the more the fly will sink, the deeper it will go.
Well, now, I use a short leader on a sinking line because it'll get down. But on a floating line with a sinking fly, you need a longer leader depending on the depth. But the key word here is to fish slowly.
Yes.
These things come up almost imperceptibly slow. So you use a hand twist retrieve or a stripping retrieve where you just draw a few inches and let it sink, draw a few inches.
And if you think you're going too slow, slow down.
Slow down. Now, if you're fishing on top and want to be in that top inch or two of water, you can actually grease the leader down to within a couple of inches of the fly, so the fly will sink just under the surface.
But do you find in some areas you fished, if you grease that leader, the shadow will actually distract from it?
I don't know that I've had the problem. I may have not known it. But it's the only way I know of to keep that fly where I want it.
Yeah, I've seen it in a shallow lake.
It can happen, I'm sure. Sometimes I even go down so far as to grease the thorax of the fly, but not the body, so it'll hang vertically in the film like the natural.
And that's the beauty of this one with that CDC. Boy, it's nice. The tip up and float right there. Yes.
But the key word is always to fish slowly. If you see the fish working, see the fish rise, you cast out ahead of them, you let it sit and you let it sit, and if you give it any motion at all, it's just a slow draw. And midges drive people crazy because they see fish rising all over.
So they're taking
all
dry
these
flies.
bugs, and they put a little dry on. And you have to realize sometimes you'll see a fish leaping clear out of the water to take the flying insect. But when they're on midge pupa, the adult comes out flying, and usually they're sipping right in or under the surface. The rings you see are indicative of sucking out of the surface, or if you see a break, it may be the fish turning.
Like in a lake. You'll see a fish rising, rising. You want to cast, hopefully, where the next one will be.
Right.
My luck, he'll be over here next time.
But don't be fooled by the broken water surface into thinking they're taking. If they're taking the adults, you'll see a splash. Usually, if they're taking in the film, you'll see the rings.
Yes.
The spreading rings.
Just
and that's the tip off.
Yes.
Well, that's our show for today, folks. We've tied the Rio Grande King Trude. We've tied the Girdle Bug, and now the CDC Midge. We'll see you next week.
Dave and Leroy have produced two 90-minute videos covering new and exciting tips on how to make your fly tying better and more effective. They introduce you to everything you need as a beginner and demonstrate helpful techniques for intermediate tiers. Fly Tying Techniques Volumes 1 and 2 are available by calling 1-800-883-0124. Cost of each video is $28.95 plus shipping and handling, or get the 2-volume set for just $52.95. You can also order the programs in this series. Each 90-minute videotape includes 3 programs for just $22.95, plus shipping and handling. To order Fly Tying, the Angler's art videos, and techniques tapes, call 1-800-883-0124.